Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this most special event, I think. Welcome to the Anthropocene. That's what we've called this encounter between two of the most important philosophers of our time, Peter Sloterdijk and Bernard Stiegler. My name is Lisa Doeland. I work at Radboud Reflects, one of the organizers of this event. Aside from Radboud Reflects, I have to say there are 4 this time that helped made it possible. And we needed those. They were Radboud Honors Academy, New Techniques Collective, the Institute for Science, Innovation and Society, and the Faculty of Philosophy, Theology and Religious Studies. The last 2 both from the Radboud University. But all of this wouldn't have been possible without one very special man, I think. Peter Lemmens, the driving force behind this encounter. Peter Lemmens is from the Institute for Society Innovation, Science Innovation and Society. So to give a good and really good introduction to this evening, these 2 special philosophers, I give the floor to Peter Lemmens.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for this nice introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Lemmens, indeed, and I'm from the Radboud University. And I want to welcome you all to this special evening with 2 of the most original and thought-provoking philosophers of today, Peter Sloterdijk and Bernard Stiegler. We will enter into a debate tonight on what is arguably the most pressing issue humanity is confronted with at the moment. And that is the question of how to deal with the enormous and mostly destructive effects of our global technological civilization on the planet. Global warming, water pollution, ocean acidification, deforestation, ecological deterioration, overpopulation, and a massive extinction of species on a scale that is unprecedented in the whole of evolutionary history are all phenomena that attest to the largely negative impact of human culture on the Earth, or the Earth system, as it is more frequently called in the scientific literature. This impact is huge, and according to a growing number of climatologists and Earth system scientists, it has become so overwhelming over the last centuries that the collective action of all humans, greatly potentiated by their technologies, of course, has now become the most important geological factor, trumping all the natural ones and therefore being more determinative for the state of the Earth than all those natural factors together. Welcome indeed to the Anthropocene, since this is the name that has been proposed in 2000 by the Dutch atmospheric chemist Paul Crutzen to designate a new geological era in which the human, anthropos in Greek, has become the principal geological mover and shaker. This term, although far from uncontroversial, has caught on since then, and not only in geology, climatology, ecology, and other so-called natural sciences, but also and much more prominently in the so-called humanities, such as history, philosophy, theology, anthropology, and the social sciences, which traditionally study this anthropos that now seems to have become a genuine natural force in its own right, capable of disturbing what was once called the natural order. The Anthropocene is a term that definitely stirs the imagination, yet it also frightens, engendering a completely new kind of uncanniness, Unheimlichkeit, since what it conveys is not only humanity's agency in shaping the Earth system. Its more dramatic and epoch-changing message, I would say, is that the human will have to become responsible itself, although this might sound as hubris, for the maintenance of the Earth's biosphere as the very condition of its own survival. This means that besides naming a geological state of affairs, the term Anthropocene designates nothing less than a call to humanity, a call with an unprecedented and unsurpassable ethical and political urgency that compels humans to explicitly take on the responsibility for the habitability of the Earth's biosphere that they in fact already have. The term Anthropocene thus not only credits humans with the power and agency to change the face of the earth, but more importantly summons them to take active responsibility for it and become finally mature, as Peter Sloterdijk wrote already in 1993 in his fine little treatise World Strangeness, Weltfremdheid. It is this question of ecological responsibility put forward already more than 3 decades ago by the German philosopher Hans Jonas that will be central, I presume, in the debate that you'll be hearing soon, in particular as it pertains to the issue of how to deal with it technologically as well as politically. But before giving the floor to our lovely moderator Lisa Douland, however, I would like to conclude with very briefly introducing our 2 distinguished guests to you. Peter Sloterdijk is a German philosopher and incidental novelist, well known and highly popular among the Dutch public. He was a professor at the Akademie der Bildenden Künste in Vienna and until this year rector of the Hochschule für Gestaltung in his birthplace, Karlsruhe. Since his explosive debut, Critique of Cynical Reason in 1983, he has published many books and articles that never failed to arouse controversies and provoke debate. Around the turn of the century, his massive Spheres trilogy appeared, in which he developed a new philosophically and radically historical anthropology based on the idea of humans as sphere-building, sphere-abiding, and also sphere-born creatures, an anthropology eminently suited for the age of the Anthropocene. His most recent book, What Happened in the 20th Century, Was geschah im 20. Jahrhundert, explores the fate of a humanity recovering from the adventures of extremist reason and finding itself back on a finite, fragile, and battered planet, on which the only thing that can still be presupposed is the fact that nothing can be presupposed anymore, as Sloterdijk claims so beautifully. Bernard Stiegler is a French philosopher and noopolitical activist who is famous for his Technics and Time trilogy, in which he reinterprets the history of Western philosophy from the perspective of its forgotten or neglected technical condition. He teaches philosophy at the Université de Compiègne in France and leads the Institut de Recherche et d'Innovation at the Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris. He is also the founder, in 2005, of Ars Industrialis, an international organization for the promotion of a new industrial politics for the technologies of the mind, and in 2010 of the Pharmacon Philosophy Academy in Épinay, in the middle of France. His most recent book, In the Disruption, How Not to Become Insane, Dans la Disruption, Comment ne pas devenir fou, addresses the current age of the Anthropocene as symptomatic of a fundamental civilizational crisis in denial of itself, and proposes strategies for an exit. Convinced that these thinkers have a lot in common in their views on the human-technology relation and their diagnosis of our current situation, yet also diverge in many other respects, I am looking forward to an exciting encounter. And so I now want to give the floor to Lisa Douland from the Radboud Reflects, who will lead the debate this evening. Thank you very much for your attention.
We have an hour, maybe a bit more, to discuss the Anthropocene. That might not be much, but we'll try. I want to... the Anthropocene is a new era, new territory. You are philosophers both, of course, so I thought let's return to the 4 basic classical philosophical questions Immanuel Kant formulated, which are: what can I know? What may I hope for? What must I do? And of course, who is man, or what does it mean to be human? I think all very important questions in this Anthropocene, because what is happening, what will happen, is there a future left? What must I do? The responsibility seems to be overwhelming sometimes. And who is this anthropos that has become such a geological force, as Peter Lemmens explained. So I think we must start with the last question. Who is man? Who are we nowadays? Who is this Anthropos?
He's a man.
Professor Sloterdijk.
I would say the question as such has already undergone a deep transformation since the period when the Kantian question was asked. Because for us, it's not that much a question or an affair of identity, but of localization. We rather are inclined to put the question into the following form: where is the man, or where is man, or mankind? So there is a topological turn inside the anthropological reflections, and that creates this echo also on the level of the creation of new concepts like Anthropocene. Man and Earth have begun a totally new kind of relationship, since we can no longer pretend to be merely players before the background, the eternal background of nature. Nature has left its position in the background of human plays and has become an actor in his own right. And that's what this hyperbolic concept of Anthropocene seems to symbolize.
Yes. Professor Stiegler, would you answer the question the same? Somewhat?
Of course, not exactly the same, but
yeah.
Yes, I agree. I agree with Peter.
We're in luck.
Now, yes, first I will repeat what said Peter, that the question today is not, it's impossible to ask a question in the same way like Kant, of course. Why? This is the question. Yes, there is a question of locality today of the man, and the relationship between the man and its Welt or Umwelt is local milieu or environment. Now we know also that man is a process of transformation where maybe it's impossible to answer such a question. And maybe it's necessary to move from this question to another one. Because speaking about Kant, we must also remember that about what Kant said concerning Herder, when Herder explained a little bit before Kant's statements that the man was a body transformed by its tools, and that this process of genesis was a very important question in philosophy. For Kant, it was not relevant, such a question. For us, it is an irreducible question. We cannot avoid such a question. So, now, I think that the question of man is techniques and technology. Because man is a living being, but this living being is always transformed by its activity, and this transformation is what leads to what we call now the Anthropocene. And the Anthropocene is an unbearable, impossible, and unlivable, if it's possible to say that, situation. It's an impasse. So the man is today is a question. in which I believe we have to move from the question of the living being that a man is to the non-living beings that are his. It's not only tools but artifacts, the product of what is called exosomatization.
But we need to go from living to non-living. That's
yes.
Yeah.
Non-living but organized non-living beings. I think the big question that it was impossible to address as such for Kant, even if Kant opened the possibilities to address such a question, is the fact that we have organized inorganic beings that are not living beings, but that are not object of physics. So we have a new dimension into the cosmos.
Because we're always already also technological beings.
Yes. But claiming technological beings is a problem because it is immediately introducing the question of means of production, etc. And it is not only it is a question of the place, the locality that is created by such artificial organs that are not reducible to the question of the milieu for the living beings.
Maybe I should go back for a second to the position of Kant, which seems to have been much more comfortable than the position in which we find ourselves. For Kant, when he looked back, he saw an empire of anthropological doctrines in which the human being was designed as an image of God. For Kant, this kind of talk would have been too enthusiastic, but nevertheless, for him, it was absolutely clear that the human, as carrier of reason, can still occupy an outstanding position, and especially with the consequence that human beings have duties against themselves. That is something extraordinary, because they are, as it were, functionaries of the cosmos of reason in a single case. Every human being is a functionary of the ratio of reason. Just as in Protestantism, every man, every woman is a priest. For us, the situation has changed to the extent that the moderns are no longer the images of God, but rather images of something monstrous. We seem to have been created in the image of a monstrosity. This monstrosity was already hidden in God, because God, one of his most important attributes was impassibility. And passibility is the incapacity to suffer. And this, I hear something of that tonality in what you said. The non-living side of the monster, is coming to the foreground of the modern way of life through the technological revolution that has started in the later Middle Ages and reached its first peak in the 18th century with the introduction of the steam engine. Because since the 18th century, there is a new working class in the world. It's no longer a human working class, but a pre-human or a human working class. It is a burning class, as it were, coal, and later on all these fossil materials, they do the real work. This big Marxist mystification of the proletariat was always designed to hide the fact that behind the workers there is a super worker, an inhuman super worker who does most of the work. And setting these monstrosities free, these super workers behind the surface of civilization, that leads into the predicament that we articulate today with the concept of Anthropocene, because there are too many monsters, too many titans among us who
But could you explain these monsters a bit more? Because when I hear you, I think maybe it's the irrational or something that was unleashed that is opposed to reason, as Kant saw it.
No, it is energy in a pre-classical form. Our classical physics has always made the assumption that energy exists mostly in connection with a well-shaped form, so that the wild side of energy should not become too manifest. But we must not forget that the Greek theology knew two generations of gods. There was the Titanic realm and the Olympic realm. And the Olympism was always under stress from the side of these chained titans. And my feeling is that modernity is about unchaining the titanic forces that lay at the ground of the Olympic construction of the world.
Yeah. Why did this Anthropocene start then? So why did we become a geological force starting at about 1800? Because Professor Stiegler, you said man is always already is a technical being, but something changed in the 1800s about. What did change?
It was the appearance of course, industrial revolution and industrial capitalism. Capitalism that organized a new type of society based on change. It's not. This didn't appear in the 19th century, but at the end of the 18th century, particularly, or rather, let's say at the beginning of the 19th century, with capitalism, and it was a conjunction of forces, like forces of labor, forces of science, philosophy, dedicated to the transformation of the world, and such a transformation completely transformed the conditions of life and of thinking itself, of course. Here, the question of entropy is the most important one, because first, in the time of Immanuel Kant, entropy, in the sense of a theory of dissipation of energy in the universe, that was opened in 1824 in France by a physicist, Sadi Carnot, and theorized in Germany in 1865 by Clausius, completely changed the question of the cosmos and the universe. The cosmos and the universe. I say and because the universe was the question opened during, let's say, the 17th century, as a universal space that was the object of physics, and that became astrophysics, and the cosmos regressed as a question of topology, of locality, of topoi in the sense of Aristotle. Everybody knows that. But with the appearance of thermodynamics, and after thermodynamics, the theory of negative entropy, that is the definition of life as the possibility to, not to invert, but to diminish, to decrease the rate of entropy locally for making possible the life. These questions appeared exactly in the moment in which the increase of entropy began with the Anthropocene, because the Anthropocene with the
but
A.
The entropy, that's how should we understand that term exactly? I understand. I have some difficulty with it myself. Is it some sort of more poor, less diversity, something like that?
No. First, entropy is a process, a thermodynamic process that claims that shows that energy is necessarily oriented towards dissipation. That is disappearance. Now, and this process was in the 20th century, in 1924, confirmed by observations at the astrophysics level, because the expansion of the universe is a kind of not illustration of concretization and demonstration of such a law. That was first, this expansion of the universe refused by Einstein. This is very important to say that it is not for telling that Einstein was not so intelligent, we say, etc. It is not this question. It is if we want to apprehend the enormous transformation of thought that was the theory of thermodynamic entropy, and after that, the appearance of the theory of negative entropy as a definition of life, we must understand that even for Einstein it was impossible. He needed 8 years for accepting this fact. So it was in the epoch in the time of Kant, it was not possible to imagine such a question. Why? Because cosmos at this time, or the universe, was in equilibrium.
Yeah.
And you have something extremely striking, that is, in the same time, you have a change in reality by the beginning of the Anthropocene, because this is a time in which Anthropocene begins, in the time of Kant himself, and a process by which the increasing of the rate of entropy is suddenly accelerating, producing an acceleration that is now in our situation, that is in 2016, what is called disruption. That is an acceleration produced now by the digital economy that is capable to run at 2/3 of the speed of light, and this is 4 million times faster than our nervous system. And this is opening the question. The Anthropocene begins with this steam machine and theory of entropy appearing with the steam engine, and is now reaching, I believe, the limits of the Anthropocene. Yeah. This is the reason for which I say that we need to enter what I call the neg-Anthropocene. That is a new stage in which what I call the neg-Anthropos is capable to produce to increase the rate of negentropy.
Yeah.
I'd like to go one step back to this age of the classical machines. I think the moderns still hesitate to understand fully what really happened with the introduction of these first real fire-powered machines within the ecosystem of what Marx calls the metabolism of mankind with nature, which is the technical definition of work. The idea of work itself underwent a deep transformation of its meaning. The very moment when human beings started to create this intimate link between burning and working, because there is eventually no work at all possible without this energy aspect. And burning is the case of emergency of an entropic activity. Modern beings are in the first quality burners, not even consumers, but before they become consumers, they are burners. And this burning quality is a game that can be played as long until everybody has become a member of the burning class. That is something Max Weber had in mind in these dramatic passages you all may be aware of. The last dramatic passages in his essay on the Protestant ethics, that we are caught in this iron cage of the necessity to look into a mechanized future. And this play will be played until the moment when the last ton of iron will be burned with the last ton of coal.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, an interesting document, because Max Weber, when he wrote that around 1920, he was not yet aware of the oil age that was just about to begin.
Yeah, when did we become aware that there are, let's call them limits to growth? That at one point there would be no more oil, there would be no more coal, etc. Is that something that we only start to see now, or maybe 40 years from the 1970s, or is that something that we did way before, but tend to forget every time because we don't like the idea that there are limits to it?
This is the first formulation of the so-called energetic imperative by the German chemist and physicist Wilhelm Ostwald. Goes back to the year 1912. Speaking of the energetic imperative, that contains a very simple formula that on a finite basis you cannot burn indefinitely in these amounts of energy. This was a kind of energetic pacifism, because in 1912 this was a remarkable sentence, because in 1914 the European started the biggest orgy of expenditure and wasting that ever happened. And in a certain way, it has not stopped since. It has been transformed in civil forms, because what we call mobilization of an army. We see that every year, when the great holidays of Baden-Württemberg or Nordrhein-Westfalen are beginning, let alone the Dutch holidays. They mobilize more man and material than the German army in August 1914. And this state of permanent mobilization, was never stopped. It was atomized. There are our car park has no longer the form of an army, but there is a kind of individual mobilization going on and on. And there is at the moment very little hope for a real demobilization. In the contrary, all ambitions and ambition making is what modern literature and modern philosophy is all about. Create a new generation of carriers of ambitions. But there is very little hopes that this mobilization of the ambitions could stop. In the contrary, they go even further and further.
Yeah. Do you agree, Professor Stiegler, that this mobilization is something that will probably not be easy to stop? But should we? Is that the big problem of the Anthropocene, that we keep on moving, changing, and at some point we need to stop doing that?
For me, the first real problem of Anthropocene is not the exhaustion of energy, of resources for energy, like coal or oil. It is proletarianization, in the sense in which proletarianization is the destruction of knowledge. And the reason for which so many people need to move and to produce expenditure, to consume, to burn, is the result of a frustration in the existence.
So out of frustration?
A frustration that is produced by the destruction of work. Work meaning here, not labor. And claiming this, I believe that when it is said that, we talked about this in the seminar before this session today, that the Anthropocene is called also the Capitalocene. This means, first of all, for me, two things. That first, this mobilization, in the sense in which Peter Sloterdijk used this reference, is produced by the use of computation, of calculation, of technologies, of management of matter, of human resources, etc., based on calculation and computation.
Yeah.
And this is based on a process of proletarianization. That I use this expression not only in the sense of Marx and Engels, but in a sense that it's sometimes surprising for people when I say that, but opened by Socrates in Protagoras and in Phaedrus, 5 centuries before Christ. Because the question here is that the process of not only the Anthropocene, but the anthropogenesis, what is called anthropogenesis, that is for me a neg-anthropogenesis, is a process of exteriorization of knowledge. And this process of exteriorization of knowledge, which is not an exteriorization of something that was before internalized, but that is the production of knowledge, is also a production of, it is also a loss of knowledge. That is, it is a process of alienation. And I think that what happens with the appearance of industrial capitalism, that is the exploitation of science and technology for putting the knowledge into machines, into tools, etc., is producing a generalized proletarianization, not only of the workers, and first of the manual workers, but also of the consumers by marketing.
So we are sort of becoming slaves of the
becoming
machines.
Dependent, and today we say addict. People speak about addicting, addict capitalism, etc. Capitalism of addiction, drive-based capitalism, etc. And this produces a disease, a malaise, a situation of frustration that for which the answer to this negative stimulation is the increase of consumption. Now, I think this is not sustainable, not only because of the limits of the resources of the Earth, but because it is mentally, it is psychically unbearable, and it is particularly serious for the young people.
But what is the solution? Less technology?
No, not at all. The question is not technology. The question is a bad articulation between technology and, let's call that, psychic apparatuses and social apparatuses. And this question is, Peter Sloterdijk would call that maybe anthropotechnics, articulation between the man and its technical condition. Personally, I call that a problem of organology. That is a problem of articulation between endosomatic organs, my hand, my eyes, my brain, exosomatic organs, the mic in which I am speaking now, and social organizations like the university inviting us to discuss here today. And I think these arrangements are called political questions. And not only political questions, but economic questions. Here it is very important to revisit an economist who is also a mathematician that is called, the name is Georgescu-Roegen, who was a thinker of economy from the point of view of, first, economy is what has the aim to reduce the rate of entropy, to produce low entropy, and second, to articulate organs in an exosomatic situation in which it's not biology that makes the choices for the selection, the evolution. It is a problem of artificial selection. And here we have to change this the economic situation, because today this process is entropic at a huge level, and it is not sustainable. When we talk...
I want to... because we have 3 more questions to go, and yes, and a lot more from you, I think, at the end. We'll get into the political side later on.
Yeah.
Because the second question, what can I know, is the question Kant asked. And if people are talking about the Anthropocene, they're mostly talking about some apocalyptic future, or there's some sort of apocalyptic feel about this. But then you get the idea of, then people say, but are you sure? Is it really going to happen? Is this a typical problem for the Anthropocene, that we don't really know what the future has in store, but it's probably bleak?
No, that would not be a big novelty to human beings, because for times immemorial we always have been animals to whom you should explain the situation, because the necessity for thinking arises from the fact that nobody was present at the beginning. So thinking and late coming are approximately the same thing until Heidegger, who changed the whole regime. But so what can we know? First of all, people are unable to ask this question, which is for good reasons one of the pillars of criticism. In ancient times, people were not yet ready to really ask the question, what can we know? À la rigueur, they were already capable to ask, what is an idea? What is a man? What is an animal? What is a star? What is a number? But we all live under an intellectual regime in which it is more important to have any answer, but no answer. Every error is better than no answer. And only by exchanging insufficient answers, that carry from the 18th century on the name of Vorurteile, or prejudice. Only through the critique of prejudice we replace meanings by insights. That is a movement in which our civilization tries to find its identity. But at the moment being, if you look around, there is a very deep mood of agnosticism. We know that much, but it doesn't help anything. And that is the reason why the last dinosaurs, philosophers like Bernhard and me, and some of our colleagues, still go on and withstand this atmosphere of collective cognitive desperation. This is the first chapter of philosophy, not what can we know, but why should we go on wanting to know? Because the danger of resignation and the gesture of throwing helpless knowledge away, this temptation is overwhelming everywhere. And that's what we see all over the world today. They have lost the perspective. They see that debt cannot be paid. I think this is a basic feeling. To a certain degree, debts, also in the form of public debt or debt publique, can be a means of production and the creation of future, because every credit is virtually a good promise, as long as there is a perspective that the borrower should give back. And now this bona fide credit is about to disappear, and the feeling that fraud is in the air, but not only fiscal fraud, but a much more generalized fraud, monetary fraud, a future fraud. That makes the question, what can I know, so dramatic. We have to maintain the question.
Philosophers have to maintain the question, or all of us. Yeah.
Let's ask first what is said in society concerning this. Now, for the 2 last years, you could hear, for example, that Stephen Hawking says artificial intelligence is completely transforming science. It's extremely dangerous. Even William Gates said that as the boss, the CEO of the most important, one of the most important companies in computation, etc., etc. What does that mean? It means that we don't know what is knowledge. So the first question today is not what can I know, or can we know? It is what is knowledge. We don't know. We thought to know in the 18th century what is knowledge. It was given by a kind of transcendental evidence. Today it's not at all the case. And I think that we have to redefine what is knowledge. For example, is it cognition? What is cognition? If we follow cognitivism, cognition is something you can observe in a plant or an animal, in a machine, like a missile, for example, or a human. And such a definition of knowledge is completely lacking what is knowledge for me. Because knowledge is first what is exteriorized and formalized precisely in an organ that is an exosomatized one that I call, after Socrates, a hypomnesic exosomatization. That is an exosomatization of the mental contents in a form that can be pictures, writing, or today computers, etc., etc. And such a knowledge that is transmitted from generation to generation is producing the possibility to bifurcate, that is, to create bifurcations, negentropy. And this is the reason for which today I believe that we have to follow Whitehead when he says that reason is, first of all, a function of life, and such a function of life is struggling against entropy. It was, of course, absolutely impossible to ask such questions in time of Kant. Now we are in a completely different time. This doesn't mean that we must not read and study Kant, all to the contrary, because this was produced by the transformation of the Enlightenment, Aufklärung, and there is a history for which also it is very important. I think with Peter we have the same interest for Heidegger concerning this question, because Heidegger was a thinker of this, asking what is the status of calculation into knowledge. And now the question that was in the time of Heidegger, for example, in Gelassenheit, a completely reactionary proposal for the contemporary people at this time. And today, for me, it's still reactionary in the formulation. Nevertheless, if you read this text, for example, it is describing exactly what we can say to do today with big data, etc., that are prioritizing not only the manual workers or the consumers, but Alan Greenspan, for example. If you read what he said faced with the Senate in Washington in 2008, the 23rd of October, he explained that he was proletarianized by the algorithms. And this is extremely important to see.
So the algorithms that had the agency, not
He said it's not, it is today impossible for me or for anybody to understand what is really happening on the financial markets, because the speed of the algorithms makes this impossible to think. I completely disagree with this, but this is the discourse of a proletariat. People.
Yes.
And everybody is proletarianized today by such a situation. But it is completely false to say that we cannot overcome such a situation. The question is to re-articulate the question, the dimensions of knowledge that are understanding as what is making analytic possibilities for computation to transform the data of intuition that are called today data, not of intuition. Data, in the 17th century, data was meaning intuition. Today, data doesn't mean intuition. They mean what is captured by the smartphones, etc., by the data economy. And on the other side, there is a synthetic dimension of knowledge that is the condition of knowledge as a function for producing bifurcation. And those were separated by the process of proletarianization through what Marx called the fixed capital. Yeah. And I think we have today to re-articulate this for producing, with the time given by automation, that is a very good thing, the possibility to develop the capabilities to produce bifurcation, that is to re-articulate knowledge with those machines.
Yeah, so we need them.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go on to the third question. After a long silence, why not? Okay, so what must we do? So technology will help us. Automated processes will help us as long as we don't become addicted to them, serve ourselves over to technology. But what is this Anthropocene asking from us? Maybe
get a bit back from the technological part, there always seems to be a big responsibility for all of us individually to do something. There's always seems to be a question of guilt. We have to fix the blame. Are we responsible? Are we guilty? How are we going to is it to us individually to try and change things? Make sure we can keep on living here on this planet.
The concept of Anthropocene sounds, in my eyes, like a construction designed by jurists.
Sorry, by?
Juristen. Yeah? Juristen, dangerous class of human beings. Who have to answer the question, they have to answer the question, who done it? Also, in formal terms, you call that the attribution of agency. The capacity to act is a basis for all legal constructions, because events cannot be charged, and events cannot be taken to court. By the way, that's exactly what the human irrationality always wants, to retransform events into acts and take the actors to court. This is subject matter on which especially Nietzsche has wonderfully elaborated. So, Anthropocene means it is not only all this phenomenology of power and energy, complexity, and artificial intelligence. It is also about the formulation a new address to which you can send your letters of accusation. And here a strange remark comes to my mind. I remember a sentence by Carl Schmitt, who once said, wer Menschheit sagt, will betrügen. He who pronounces the word mankind is an imposter, or he wants to commit.
Why? Because mankind doesn't exist as such?
Because mankind is a wrong address. Did you ever try to send an email to mankind? You will receive an answer by the mailer demon. The ask could not be fulfilled, and then so address error. But the victim of this is, by the way, Friedrich Schiller, with his famous Ode of Joy, who wanted to send a kiss to the whole world, and this kiss has not yet been delivered until now.
But isn't it the case of no blame, no responsibility?
No, but what I want to say is the following thing. For the first time, humanity is about to become a real address. Because this is the drama of the hidden in the concept of Anthropocene. It is a test to bring out if humanity can become a real entity. If these crowds can produce a sufficient amount of agency, capacity to act reasonably, or to act below the level of self-destruction, because this is a very modest concept of reason. A little bit below the level of full self-destruction.
And
then
will we?
This gesture of accusation can be transformed in a meaningful metanoetic process in the individual who can consider how to change their life according to the situation.
Yeah. And is that something that we really want then, that we desire maybe? Or is it an ethical imperative? The English title of one of your books is You Must Change Your Life. So you must.
Yeah.
There's an imperative there. It doesn't seem to come from within, but without.
Why within?
No?
Why not within?
Yeah, but
Why without?
If people tell me I must do something,
Because you think it is Moses who says you
I
must.
don't want to. Yeah.
but consider a drowning man in the sea. He hears an imperative: you must swim. And this swimming imperative is not the voice,
come from God,
the voice of a superego or something. It is the situation itself that comes to itself inside you. It has nothing to do with the authority complex. That exists, I know. And there are some people who are more inclined to anti-authoritarian reflexes than others. Maybe you are too young to remember the Italian railways in the time when you could still open the window. For most of you, these are stories of the last century. You could still open the window in all European trains.
Yeah.
And there was there was a hint under every window in 4 languages. So the European Union of the window warning was already perfectly developed. Nicht hinauslehnen in German. It's very, very simple. In English, do not lean out. In French, ne pas se pencher au dehors. In Italian, they said, è pericoloso sporgersi. Das heißt, it's dangerous to lean out. Because would say, vietato, this sporgersi. The whole country would die at the window of the windows of that train. So there is something to that question. This must in you must change your life. This is a place where the coming up of voices can be examined. Voices that are not necessarily voices from dictators or authoritarian instances, but there is something like a voice of reason. If you can, if you can believe that, you cannot not exercise this kind of strange profession that we are practicing for half a century already.
Now the question you addressed was guilty. Is it a question for individuals or for collectivity? I think the question is what I call therapeutics. And we are what I call exosomatized living beings. And the paradox for such living beings is that our artificial organs are both curative and poisonous. And if we need knowledge, it is because we have to increase the curative side and to decrease the poisonous one. This is the need for knowledge. And this is the reason for which you have knowledge in Inuit society, in shamanic society, in every kind of society. Now the question is today the redefinition of such a therapeutics. Because if we are not capable to understand that those organs, artificial organs, exosomatized organs, are producing entropy and negentropy, we cannot define the way by which we can increase the production of negentropy. This is the question of knowledge understood as therapeutic for me. This is also what Peter Sloterdijk calls disciplines and practice exercises, etc.
So we need to learn to understand.
Your question was, is it individual or collective? And I think it is very important to address this question. It is individual and collective because it is knowledge. Now, the problem is the status of bifurcation and the way by which such bifurcation is capable to produce what I call, with using a concept for French philosopher with Gilbert Simondon, a process of trans-individuation. It is a question today for the academics. Why? I continue to believe that academics have a role to play here, as they are so-called scientists or philosophers or teachers of a discipline that is rational in the sense in which it is exposed to the critique of peers. And such a situation is, of course, extremely difficult today because knowledge has become a function of production in the current capitalism. So there is a question of political economy, of critique of political economy, but also of critique of the status of knowledge in the current political economy. That is a knowledge that is destroyed in a way by the process of proletarianization, and that is transformed into a process of control and information, not at all of knowledge, because knowledge is capable to produce bifurcations, that is, possibilities that are not contained in the fixed capital, that are not contained in the exosomatization that is already realized. And in such a way, the question is the status of dreaming. This is the reason for which it is very important to reread Nietzsche, the young Nietzsche, Binswanger, the psychiatric, Paul Valéry, all those people who, and young Foucault, Michel Foucault, all those people who said that, and now also a contemporary anthropologist, paleoanthropologist, who says that what we can observe in the Paleolithic, upper Paleolithic period is the dreams of the people of this time. And this is a stage in the process of exosomatization that is opening the period of what I call hypomnesic memory and exteriorization or exosomatization. Now, as you may know, Jonathan Crary says, for example, in Columbia University in New York, that the main effect of capitalism today is to destroy the possibility to dream. And it's, of course, we can discuss this, but what is said is that we can modify the activity of dreaming by technologies, not only by controlling the brain with, as it was made in Japan by a team of neuroscientists, but by the activity of media, etc. The question is today to to understand that the status of knowledge has completely changed in the last century, and to critique it, because it is the role of knowledge to criticize and to be able to discern the limits of the situation. The problem is not at all today to refuse, for example, automation, algorithms. It's impossible first, and it is also completely stupid. The real question is, what kind of therapeutics are we capable to produce with this? And this question is not only a question of what is my own discipline, my technique of the self in the sense of Foucault or in the sense of Peter Sloterdijk. It is a question of political economy. It is a question of rearticulation of a new project, because everybody knows that it is true that the situation is impossible. We cannot stay in such an Anthropocene. This is a reason for which it is necessary to produce a new capacity to bifurcate and to create new forms of knowledge using those technologies.
And therefore we need to dream more.
Sorry?
For those new kinds of knowledge.
I didn't.
We need to dream.
Yes, but what is to dream? What is to dream? If you, excuse me, just I answer this question in a sentence. If you read the answer of Michel Foucault to Jacques Derrida when they had this fight about the status of madness in Descartes, you remember maybe that Derrida said, but of course there is madness in Descartes, because the malingénie is madness as such, the base of knowledge. And Foucault answered, but it is not at all the question. The real question for Descartes is dreaming as the condition of meditation. But such a condition of meditation that dreaming is a process of exosomatization that is at the origin that dreaming that is the origin of exosomatization. Of course, it is not what is said by Descartes. But Descartes, when developing in the rules for the direction of mind, particularly 15 and 16th, the concept of writing and reading for noting what I meditate was opening this question. So I think, yes, we have to reevaluate completely what is the status of dreaming in the activity of knowledge, as knowledge produces the process of transformation of the world, that is of exosomatization.
Yeah. Do you agree that we need to dream more? Think big, maybe?
Think big?
Dream more?
No, my dreams used to be nightmares.
But they are not anymore.
Yeah, and I have a perverse relationship with my suitcase. That comes and goes in my dreams. And every second morning I wake up and the suitcase has gone. So, and I'm happy when I can leave the state of dreaming behind me, and towards 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I become a good Cartesian.
I have one more question to go, but I'll leave it for the end.
No.
Yes, I will, because I'm very curious as to what you in the audience want to ask, tell. There are, I think, 3 people with microphones. Maybe I can get a little more light in the audience so I can actually, so not on us, but on them. And then I'm hoping I see you and give you, and please stand up, that would work. This is better. So if you want to ask a question, please stand up. If I point to you, you're up, and there's a microphone coming. Yes, over there, please.
Thank you. I have a quick question. So you, Peter, talk about immunology, and Bernard, you talk about pharmacology. What is the stake of those 2 propositions for the Anthropocene?
So, what is the stake of immunology in your case and pharmacology in your case for the Anthropocene, right? Yes. That's the question.
Yeah. 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 First of all, immunology is a theory designed to describe incarnated expectations of vulnerations. So an immune system is even a spatialized or somewhere else incarnated expectation that the world is a place where you can hurt yourself. That means life itself must be defined as the success phase of an immune system. Individualized life. And to the extent that life is always individualized, time has to be understood as the success period of an immune system. That changes the outlook on life, society, law, medicine, and coexistence in a quite dramatic way. Because most of the things we used to discuss in terms of social interaction, etc., are in reality frictions between a plurality of immunity constructs. For instance, religions. Inter-religious fights are especially absurd because there are always several immunological fortresses, as it were, that are waging war against another. So, but my theoretical dream is to develop this immunological point of view further into a general theory of peace.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I call pharmacology is what allows to overcome the question of immunology, I believe. If we follow Georges Canguilhem, when he says that the question of life is the first question for living beings in general is what he calls the infidelity of the milieu, but that for the human it is a very special question because the human is itself producing the infidelity of the milieu, precisely through what he doesn't call exosomatization, but technology. The human is obliged to develop a pharmacology as also a pharmacy, that is an industrial production of medicines for struggling against the change he produces on himself, herself. And I think here the question of the pharmacon is also the core of the problem. If we follow, it was also the reason for which Canguilhem developed a theory of pharmacy that was not developed by
So it can both cure us or kill us.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And the question
sides.
here is to produce a knowledge for making you capable to change your life, precisely, and your relationship with the exterior, that is never only the exterior, that is always already also the interior. This was what was the stake of Derrida said concerning what he called a supplement. Now, here the problem is that you are always, when I said that dreaming is the origin of production of exosomatization is of course what you can observe on the archives, because, and this is also what is what makes the possibility of the architect compared with the bees, is capable to dream, to write this dream, and to realize it. And this realization of the dream becomes not sometimes, but always a nightmare. And this is a question of pharmacology. Now, here, the question of immunology in the sense of Peter is, for me, the status of the reference to biology and to living beings in a situation in which the most important question is the non-living organs that are produced by exosomatization. And in such a situation, medication is itself a non-living organ, an artificial synthesis, for example, of a molecule, etc., that creates a completely different question of immunology. Of course, there is a question of interior and exterior and the relationship between the two. That is a question of politics. This is a question of politics. And it is also the question of economy, because what are the frontiers? What are the borders? Today, what defines those borders is the market. Is it important to reread or not Karl Polanyi, for example, concerning these questions? Because Polanyi was describing a transformation here that was, for him, really producing a nightmare, precisely. I think we have to revisit all of these questions in the light of the question of Anthropocene. Yeah. Now, the real question is, for me, how to define our relationship to this situation. Do we say, for example, that we accept and we think, we believe that it is possible to live in such a sphere? Or do we think that it is possible to produce something else? I claim that it is not only possible, but it is the only possibility. It is exactly the same question like what said Peter concerning the situation. We are obliged to do it. This is the only reason for which it is possible to do it.
Okay, yeah. Other questions? Ja, even kijken. Yeah. I'll start with you. At the front.
I have a question for Mr. Stiegler. You've hinted on a post-living era, a post-human era, with a post-Anthropocene. Do you think it's something bad, or could it be also something good? And is it inevitable, or can we avoid it?
Okay. Actually, I don't believe that we have to enter a post-human or post-living era. I believe post-living, I don't believe at all, because we need life, and we will always need life. For example, computers will need life, but because life produces bifurcation that will be needed even for the computers if we want to maintain the systems of computers. But post-human, it's not at all a question for me, because the human is not a question for me. I don't believe that we never lived in the human era. I think the human is an artifice that was produced by ideology, and that the human is not at all the question. The question is noesis, that is thinking, if you prefer. This is the real question. And what is thinking? How is it possible to produce a thought that is really capable to produce a future into the becoming? Because future is not becoming. Future is a capacity you have to bifurcate into becoming, precisely for producing a low rate of entropy. Now, the question you ask is, of course, open in the context in which many people say we are now in the post-human philosophy. Even there is a book in America who says, I am a post-human. I'm not at all a post-human. Sorry? Okay, but what is Homo sapiens? It is, if you ask a question to paleoanthropologists, it is extremely difficult to find an agreement between them. For example, between Loroagon and Loroagon is French, and Binford, you don't have at all an agreement. The question is not the human. Humanism is a question in the sense of the Renaissance. Yes, it was a stake of the book, I don't remember the title of your book now, by Peter Sloterdijk. But it is completely different. Now, the question is not the human, it is the process by which exosomatization can continue by producing future. And the context in which the question is asked is transhumanism. If you ask this question in this context, I can answer you that for me, transhumanism is a pure storytelling developed as a marketing for an industrial strategy for generalizing the process of prioritization and at an incredible level. Now it is absolutely insolvent, absolutely. I don't address the question, is it possible to say, for example, with Kurzweil that immortality is possible? I don't think this is interesting to answer such questions. But the question is, it is not solvent as an economy. So we have to, and the real question here is not at all the human, shall we destroy the human, overcome the human, or even the Homo sapiens. The question is, what will become noesis? Is it possible? Is it still possible to have a noetic process? I believe myself that it is not at all possible, because it is based on a process of opposition between understanding and reason. That is a separation, a proletarianization of reason, if I can say, by the fact that the function of understanding in the sense of Kant has become a process of automatic computation. But we don't have time for developing this.
No, we're already at the end. I think this was the last question from you. That is, I'm sorry. I do know they'll both be signing books, I hope.
Maybe.
I hope. And then you might ask a very short question while they sign. We'll try. Because we still have one left. So both of you, a very, very short answer, please, to the question, what way may we hope for in the Anthropocene? Yeah?
The question, I would say that the question is, what is melancholy in the Anthropocene and the status of melancholy, and that is of denial. Because the real question of Anthropocene for me is, I don't want to claim you must read my book, but is madness. The real question is madness, the increase of madness. It is statistically testified today in many, many countries. For example, Krugman wrote a paper about that. In China, there is an increasing of depression, etc., etc. And the question is that in a situation in which everybody anticipates the end of the Anthropocene as the possibility of the end of life as such, and it is not only the church who says that, it is groups of scientists, it is the United Nations saying that, yeah, the climate change is the most important question. Now, if we are not capable to solve it, we will destroy all the economy, and not only economy, etc. The sixth extinction of life, etc., etc. This is repressed and denied by people. And this produces madness. This produces symptoms, and sometimes those symptoms are jihadism, suicide, auto-intoxication, fascism, etc., etc. And this is a real question. So the question is not, can we help something? We must help something, but we must produce this possibility. And the problem is that today we are overcome by such a disruption that makes us incapable to produce it. And I think it is possible to produce it, but we have to revisit completely the base of knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah?
Hope?
Hope?
You know, almost 100 years after Ernst Bloch wrote the first version of his revolutionary book, Geist der Utopie, 1918. Everybody has a feeling that the time of the triumphalism of hope and utopianism is over, and that we have to develop other strategies to go on our ray of vision, our ray of intelligence in front of us, without making these triumphant projections. And I think we are better off if we are rather silent if it comes to the question of hope, because the hoping class are the designers and developers and brokers and bankers.
Yeah. So maybe not hope too much. But of course not the destruction of it all, maybe. Yeah. It's not a very hopeful note to end with.
No. This is the last word, but we still have a postscriptum. Yeah. And, that will follow.
That was it. I want to thank both our speakers, Bernard Stiegler, Peter Sloterdijk, and of course you.